Northern Brewer takes you where homebrewing and craft brewing meet. From pro breweries to home breweries, we live and breathe beer. Craft beer celebrities, homebrew luminaries, brew sessions, and most important of all, lots of great beer. You are watching Brewing TV.
Hello, I'm Michael Dawson.
And I'm Jay Keeler. We're from Northern Brewer, and this is Brewing TV.
Today, Brewing TV is doing 3-gallon, full volume, all grain, brew in a bag. This is something you've been playing around with, right, Jake?
I have been. Over the course of the last month, I've done 3 batches. This is going to be our 4th batch today. And I've had some ups and downs. I've learned a few things along the way, and we're going to share that with you during this brew session.
Awesome. Stick around.
All for bag?
Bag for all.
So I'm going to raise my strike water to 160. We're going to put in about 7 1/4 pounds of grain. That's going to drop it down to about 154, around there. I've been doing the mashes at about 152 to 154 on these batches. On this particular setup, I've got to control the heat every now and then, bring it up, take it down. So that's something I've been learning and playing with along the way. So we're going to get our grain in a bag and then get our bag in the kettle.
Tell me about the grist. What do we got going on here, Jake Keeler?
We've got about 5 1/4 pounds of American 2-row, about a 1/2 pound of Carafa 3, and a 1 1/4 pounds or 1.5 pounds of medium crystal.
If I didn't know better, that would seem to me like some kind of Cascadian black IPA darkness.
You are correct. I've had a couple lately. Summit came out with a black ale in their Unchained series, and it kind of got me back on that style. Got me craving this. My other 3 Brew In A Bags have been a pale ale that actually then turned out to be a pale mild, a Vienna lager that actually turned out to be a Bock because the efficiency was better than expected, and then a kind of a hoppy amber, which actually was pretty close. Efficiency was a little low, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But today we're going to go for a 3-gallon version CDA. We're looking to get 1060 on the OG. Really today the aim is to follow the recipe, hit the efficiency where we want to, and actually create the beer that we're looking to create. Let's cut the heat to low.
All right.
All right.
I'll do this. I'll do this part.
Now,
There's 3 gallons total, and we're doing a full volume mash. So how much water are you starting out with?
about 5 gallons, and I'm using Beersmith 2 to do my calculations. You can get it pretty dialed in. I'm following the recommendations there.
And this is all the water that you're going to use.
This is all the water
day.
I'm going to use in the brew day.
Until we start chilling, but
Right.
so that's the full volume part.
Yep.
And this is the mash.
This is the mash, so drop that guy in there. A lot of people recommend stirring this, much like you would stir a mash when you do a mash in. So now that becomes a little bit harder depending on what kind of bag you're using.
What kind of bag are you using, Jake Keeler?
I'm just using a mesh bag that we sell at Northern Brewer. It's a fine mesh material. We actually sell a more coarse material that we used on a different session. That's something I want to play with a little bit. The opening on this bag is a little bit smaller than I'd like for this particular kettle. This is an 8-gallon kettle. And so I can't get the opening to wrap around the edge all the way. Now there are bags that are big enough to accommodate that. Would make...
That's what I've used when I've done
Right.
brews in a bags.
And that would make this process a lot easier. We could simply take a bungee cord, wrap it around the rim of the kettle, holding the bag in place, and then we can...
Just kind of stir it and have your way with it.
Exactly. And really you're going to need, you're going to need a 5-gallon kettle minimum.
For a 3-gallon full volume.
Full volume.
But for this, you need something bigger, clearly, because you had 5 gallons of strike water.
Right, exactly. So 7 gallons or 8 gallons is really, I think, ideal. Well, I think this is stirred up pretty good.
What's the temperature?
Temperature is just 155, so that's pretty good to start off, but we're going to lose a little heat here. Basically what I've been doing is I take the bag and put it to the opposite end of the thermometer here so that it's not resting up against this probe inside. Just take this bungee cord and get the bungee cord wherever.
Does it have to be a blue bungee cord?
It does not have to be a blue bungee cord.
Wow, I love the freedom of home brewing.
And that's it, just cover it up. We'll let it sit for 75 minutes, trying to keep it in the 152 to 154 temperature range. I'm probably gonna have to come back here, turn the heat back on, maybe turn it back
Goose
down.
it a little bit.
Yeah, you gotta goose it a little bit. One thing I've read about is, getting some old towels or an old sleeping bag, wrapping your kettle in that to kind of maintain that heat. I've even seen people preheat their oven to about 154, leave it at 154, and they use a ceramic vessel, and they'll do their mash in a ceramic vessel and put that inside and just keep it at that constant heat. That is another thing that you can do in your stove. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. Dive in, give it a try. The equipment's pretty minimal. The ingredients, the cost of the ingredients is pretty minimal. And if you're going for 3 gallon, even if you don't get the beer you were looking for, it's still only 3 gallons of beer.
You can find some way to choke down that pale mild.
Exactly.
75-minute mash?
I know.
Can I have something to drink?
Absolutely. Let's check out that pale mild we were talking about.
Brilliant.
This is a 3-gallon batch, and we were aiming for a pale mild. And the efficiency
Pale ale.
was a pale, yeah, sorry. A pale ale.
A pale mild.
A pale mild.
Right.
The efficiency was really low. And I think that was because of just a coarse grind. I think we needed a finer grind to get better efficiency. Wasn't the beer that I was looking for, but it's actually...
If you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need. It's a pretty sweet 3-gallon keg you put your 3-gallon batch in, too.
Yeah, once I knew I was going to go on this adventure of making all these 3-gallon batches, I thought I'd start making investment into 3-gallon kegging system. These little things are great, easy to clean, compact, you can fit a bunch in. But that being said, I'll still use my 5-gallon kegs. There's nothing wrong with putting 3 gallons of beer in 5 gallons of keg. You just have a little more head space for that CO2 to hold in.
Cheers, man. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers.
It's got good hop character.
Yep.
Pale ale ancestry. Little inside baseball. I know there's Karastan in this, and that really comes through in the flavor. It's got a really nice kind of butterscotchy caramel sweetness.
Yeah, it's this is actually a pretty fantastic beer.
Session beers.
Oh yeah, can't beat it.
They really lend themselves well to brewing in a bag. Small grain bill, easy to manage.
If you're going north of 1060, 1070, it's going to get a lot harder to do. It's going to require a lot more grain, but that's maybe an area where you can start to think about doing a partial mash. Maybe you get to 1060 with the grain, then you add a few pounds of DME to bump it up.
Goose it.
Just goose it.
Just goose it. Should we go check on the temp?
Let's do that. All right, so I want to check on this. Yeah, it's gotten to about 151. So this happened last time, my last batch a few days ago. About 15 minutes into the mash, it got a little bit lower than what I wanted it. So
yeah,
I'm gonna have to raise it back up a little bit. I'm just gonna turn the heat on a little higher.
I noticed
got it on very low.
I noticed that with thinner mashes, and this is really, really dilute. 5 gallons of water for, what was it, like 8 pounds of grain or something?
Yeah.
When it's that thin, it doesn't have a lot of natural insulation. A thick mash versus a thin mash will hold temperature a lot better. So
Right.
you got to goose it or use blankets, like you had mentioned before.
And that's kind of the trick of this all, is that, to keep the mash temp at a consistent 154 for 75 minutes, it's going to be a challenge. And so that's probably my number one challenge now with this, is how do I keep that mash temp consistent without having to come back and forth and goose the temp too much. The one thing I do know for sure is that I want a finer grind. Through my experiments, when I've done a nice fine grind, I've gotten better efficiency. When the grind hasn't been fine, it's been more coarse, I've gotten poorer efficiency. So
you have an adjustable mill.
I do.
Right?
I
and
do.
so you've been playing around with the crush.
Exactly. I've been playing around with getting a finer grind. I can show you that right now.
Yeah. Back to the basement.
So this right here is my barley crusher. Simple piece of equipment, but it's probably one of the best investments I've ever made. And being able to control my own crush has made a huge difference over the years.
Especially for a technique like this. You get the knobs here for the
Yep.
gap setting on the rollers.
Yeah, this is just the gap setting on the rollers, so you can bring the rollers closer together for a finer grind, and then move them apart for a coarser grind.
So for your first batch, the pale mild we're drinking was a coarser grind. You got lower gravity than expected. Your second batch was
A much finer grind.
and you got a Vienna lager that turned into a Vienna Bock.
Exactly. And then the third time around, actually interesting, is kind of a combination. I had a finer grind, but it was old grain. It was some grain I had left over from another batch I had already ground a long time ago, probably 2 months, which is a long time for the grain to sit ground up. So I actually got lower efficiency on that.
Sure.
So this time, fresh grain, fine grind, 75-minute mash. Hopefully that does the trick.
Doing some science.
Yeah. Process of elimination, right? Okery dokery. We are done with the mash. We did a mash out, raised it up to 168 for about 7 minutes. So now all we got to do is take the bag out. I'm actually going to put it on a strainer, let it strain a little bit, let some of that good juice come out of there.
Sweet, sweet wort.
Sweet, sweet wort. See what we can get from there. Then I'll remove the bag completely. I'm going to test the gravity to see where we're at. And then after that, we'll get it to a boil and start our boil.
Looks good.
Looking good.
Smells nice.
Good.
Blue bungee.
Remove that. It's pretty simple. Okay, now this is the one thing to keep in mind is that obviously it's a lot heavier than 7 pounds now.
Because of the water
Because
it's
of the
absorbed.
water. So just be careful.
This is just about maxing out this
Yep, this is about,
strainer.
we sell this strainer at Northern Brewer. I think 7 pounds is about as much as I would put in there.
Yeah, it's
I wouldn't go too much more than that. We'll just let that
And that-
strain for a minute.
that is the total lautering process.
Yeah, that's
For
it.
brewing in a bag, you just lift the bag out.
Lift the bag out. Now, that's not necessarily true in all techniques. If you go online, you read articles, a lot of people do sparge or rinse the grains.
So you start out with a lower volume of water. You're not doing a full
Correct.
volume mash, but you start out with a more
Yeah, and you would heat
thicker
your,
mash.
Yeah, you heat your sparge water just like you would with your normal all grain process.
like you do for a partial mash.
Yep, exactly.
And rinse this grain with some hot water to collect your pre-boil volume.
Exactly.
So that's one option.
That's one option.
It's not the option we're doing today.
No.
And by we, I mean you.
And I like to have a 5-gallon bucket handy because you're going to have some place to put this wet grain. So just do this and then take the green bag and transfer it over, put it in here. I'll put this in my compost later. Pretty good color, pretty dark. Could be a little bit darker, I think, for a CDA, but not bad.
Should pick up some color from the boil though, right?
I think so.
Smells great.
Yeah.
Malty and sweet with that chocolatey.
So let's see how we did. I kind of think of this as kind of like glazing ceramics. Put the glaze on, you kind of know what you're going to get, but you really don't know until it comes out of that kiln.
Still learning the system.
Exactly. So our pre-boil gravity, it's 13 bricks.
1052.
So 1052
Aiming
pre-boil.
for 1060 final.
Aiming 1060 final. We'll see where we get. 1052 is a good starting point.
It's awesome.
Certainly pretty good. We're at about 4 gallons, so we're probably going to lose, and typically in a boil in this kettle, for a 60-minute boil, I'll lose about 1 gallon
Okay.
because it's a little bit wider than it is tall.
Sure.
So we'll get down to that 3 gallons, and we'll see if we can't pick up a few gravity points there.
Definitely
Get closer to 160.
should be able to.
Yeah. Sweet.
Man, that was easy.
Yeah. Starting to get a boil going, so I'm going to add my 60-minute addition of hops. But before I do that, I wanted to mention I did use Buffer 5.2 pH stabilizer in the mash. This will help increase your mash efficiency with Brew In A Bag, usually about 1 teaspoon per 5 gallons. So our 60-minute addition is a combination of Centennial, Mount Rainier, and Palisade, 1 ounce. And then we're actually going to be using 5 ounces of that blend at the tail end at 5 minutes and at 0 minutes. The process has been so easy. It's added like an hour to my brew day, but it literally what I've done is I've been brewing at night typically the first 3 times, and start it when my kid comes home, start getting the strike water heated up. By the time he goes to bed, I put the bag of grain in, let that sit for an hour, goose with the temperature a little bit. And then once that's done, it's an hour for the boil. And run downstairs, chill it. It's 3 gallons, so it chills in record time. Super efficient brew day. Really easy. If it's over here on the stove, I can be over here working at the table, watching TV, watching a movie. Time flies, whatever. But it's pretty laid back, and there's less equipment involved. So altogether, it really comes down to making my brew day as easy as possible. Because what I'm looking to do is I want all grain beer. I want the quality of all grain beer, but I want the simplicity of extract brewing as far as process and equipment is concerned. So that's kind of what I was looking for. That's why I'm doing the Brew in a Bag. That's why it appeals to me so much. Wow, 1060. 1060. And there are ways to, if you go on the forums and you check out some articles about Brew in a Bag, a lot of people are insisting on sparging. I mean, they kind of take it to that next level, to which to me then I'm like, well then I would just do all grain brewing. I would just use my mash tun and
get a cooler.
Get a cooler and sparge it, either batch sparge or fly sparge. I mean, at that point, it's not really that different than just going the typical, I guess, the typical all grain brewing method. I guess I would call it in comparison.
It's another option,
Right.
given the constraints of equipment, time, what you want to put into it, what you want to get out of it, whether you want to, like you're kind of saying, brew more frequently. So you can, 5 gallons is a lot of beer to go through. You could be drinking that, depending on if you're having parties or if you have any friends. You can be drinking it for a while.
Thankfully, I have you guys.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good way to get more experience brewing without giving away a bunch of beer just to get rid of it.
And so far, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I've done 4 batches in probably 2.5 weeks. So that's, I haven't brewed like that in a long time, where I've gotten really excited about a particular technique or a particular way of brewing. And it's like, this has really excited me. And the pros and cons and figuring things out and troubleshooting, like why I wasn't getting as good efficiency and, trying something different the second time around. And that would be a much different thing if I was doing 5-gallon batches. The 3-gallon batches really is critical in allowing me that experimentation. If you live in a tiny apartment, I know that Brew in a Bag is pretty popular right now in dense urban areas like New York and Brooklyn. Because small equipment, it fits into a small kitchen on a small stovetop, and then even the fermentation. If you've got a 3-gallon fermenter versus a 5-gallon fermenter, that's just all the more space.
Should we talk about the pros and cons a little bit? You've already mentioned that it's easy. It lets you do other stuff while you're brewing. Low startup cost for equipment. What about the lower efficiency of the full volume, no sparge?
You could go 2 routes. You could use more grain.
Right.
And just mash a lot more grain. You're going to need a bigger vessel every time you're ramping up that grain bill, of course. The other option is that you could hit it with some DME and kind of take a partial mash or a mini mash approach to the brewing.
I was going to say it's another drawback that is brought up about brewing in a bag is that it's not that ergonomic. You've got to physically lift heavy grain out of the mash. Big kettle, lots of hot liquid. For a 3-gallon batch like this, even a 1060 beer, 7-8 pounds of grain, not too bad. It's soaks up maybe about 7 or 8 pounds worth of water. So you're lifting 15 pounds out, letting it drain, kind of maximizing the capacity of that strainer. If you do a 5-gallon batch, that gets even bigger and heavier. Even for a session strength beer. We talked a little bit about this before and kind of touches on that. We were drinking coffee instead of beer, so it was a lot angrier and more animated of a discussion than it is right now.
No, you're wrong.
The concept of efficiency not being limited to how much sugar you extract from the grain in a mash, but also time.
Right.
Your own time.
You've said several times throughout knowing you that time to you is more precious than the cost of maybe a new piece of equipment that'll be a lifetime fixture.
Right. Yeah, I've always seen it like, the equipment's the fixed asset. It costs X amount of dollars. Once you buy it, that's it. That cost is done. Maybe there's a little maintenance. You add some parts to it here and there. But your time is there's a lifetime value to time. Like, I can't get that back.
Mm-hmm.
It's a one-time use, and so my time is far more precious to me than saying, well, this one piece of equipment, if it's going to save me time, I'm going to do it. Or if I'll buy a couple more pounds of 2-row so that I can not bother with sparging to get that OG, because I don't mind paying the $3, to save me the time. Maybe that's a half hour, but I would like to think a half hour of my time is worth more than $2, $3. And so I think, well, what do I really want? And it's like, well, I want more 3-gallon batches. I want more batches of beer, more variety on tap. To achieve that, it's going to be easier if I do 3-gallon batches versus 5-gallon batches. And that way too, I almost have more assurance that I'll go through those 3-gallon batches without leaving 2 gallons or 1.5 gallons sitting in the keg going stale, in its 3rd month sitting there in my fridge, taking up space. Yeah. So that's really, I work back from that and say, 3 gallons? Yeah. I would love that a 3-gallon keg or a 5-gallon keg with 3 gallons of beer in it would be gone in like a week and a half. I'd be out of that. I'd be like, sweet, time to brew again.
Well, it is now in the fermentation chamber, on its way to becoming my first Brew In A Bag CDA. It hit my target gravity, 1060 on the nose. So I'm super happy about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Fourth time's a charm, eh?
Yeah, what did the story stick say your volume came out to?
3 gallons.
On the nose.
On the nose. So I'm pretty happy. It was a great brew day.
I didn't notice what time we started, but that can't have taken much longer than 3 hours.
No, it was about 3.5 hours.
Start to finish.
Start to finish.
That's pretty slick. You made it look easy, Keeler.
Well, I've been doing it for the last 2 weeks. This was the 4th try. So, and I think that's the story of this Brew In The Bag session, is that keep trying it, use your equipment, tweak the grain, the grind, tweak the water volumes, just play around with it until you get what you want.
You were saying off camera that you haven't been this excited to brew in a long time.
It's true.
This technique has got you so fired up. Are you fired up? Have you brewed in a bag? Tell us about it.
Give it a try. We'd like to hear what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Till next time.
All for brew.
Brew for all.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Can I have some more pale mild?
Yeah, let's go get some.
Okay.
Coming up on the next episode of Brewing TV, St. Patrick's Day is just around the corner and we're getting ready. Jake and Mike are brewing 2 beers for the occasion. One, similar to the modern Guinness, the other, a taste back in time for a historical Irish single stout porter. We'll taste their beers, and I'm even bringing a stout to this party. Brewing TV 55, all about stout. Post online Friday, February 10th.
I've replaced "that's right" with "absolutely." Absolutely. Absolutely. And being able to control my own crush has made a huge difference over the years.
Especially for a technique like this.
Absolutely. Oh, God.
I'm not a volume guy.
A tone guy.
I'm a tone guy. Exactly.
Welcome to Brewing TV. Brew In A Bag. Ding!
Some good Chex Mix. Thanks, Chip.
Is there much more? It's getting long, I think.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, wait, let's do that over again.
Why? It looks perfect to me.